Welcome back to the class, everyone. One of the dangers that can arise in Galaxy of Heroes is when we're going after all these good legendary characters, acquiring one right after the other, building teams out of those requirements, is that sometimes we leave completely off to the side the fantastic characters that aren't really required for anything. That will be the topic of the video today. I want to hone in and focus on all the characters, not all the characters, 10 of the characters in game that have good viability without necessarily being required for another character that will be a part of your roster building. Now, this doesn't take into account weird things like TB missions that nobody has access to, or platoons, or even like if you can take in 1 of 10 characters to unlock Grandmaster Yoda. That doesn't necessarily disqualify all Jedi from being on the list, but these characters are all ones that you can in theory skip and still get all the legendaries, galactic legends, epic confrontations in game. So without further ado, let's go off and start with our good friend Dark Trooper. Now, Dark Trooper is a very obvious pick. I really don't have to explain why he's good. Everybody pretty much knows why he already is, but I want to talk about him first purely because he fits the mold perfectly. There's no character, no legendary, no galactic legend that says you have to gear Dark Trooper up to Relic 5, Relic 7, Relic 8, whatever, but it's still a character that you want to have on your team because he facilitates a lot of the things that troopers can do at the very high end, or even at the lower end if you're trying to punch up using lower gear on your troopers. He just has a immense amount of damage. A lot of the offense is still going to come from Piet's unique, but the fact that his basic ability is going to be able to hit 4 times when he has 4 stacks is going to add more punch to it, no pun intended. And then on top of the fact that he also has pretty decent armor penetration when you do take him to those higher relics. He is currently on the list right now for me to have him at R7, but even at R5 he does a lot of good work and has some other good utility that goes along with it. It's not just good in PvP, but is also helpful for the assault battles. Next up is going to be Zori. I feel like we've been talking a lot about her recently, specifically because the light speed bundles have facilitated giving everyone the majority of the resistance characters. The ugly truth, and that everyone really hopefully knows by now because I've talked about it a billion times, resistance, or the second resistance team that you can make, sucks without Zori. She takes the team to a completely different level. She gives them every single thing they need. I'm not going to read it, but there's a reason why this ability is like 12 paragraphs long, and the reason why is because the resistance characters without her really aren't able to do all that much. She adds just so much to the team that without her you're really doing yourself a disservice. And as the theme of the video goes, she's not required for anything. You can get Rey, you get JTR, you get all the other things without even having to touch her, but you really do want to gear her up if you're going to get the best bang for your buck from those characters. Next up is going to be Iden. Iden, I've always really loved her ground viability, specifically in GAC with her Omicron. She can take under-geared troopers and beat even Relic Mon Mothma teams, and she has a lot of things she can do, but from a value perspective, that might be one of the most important. But the really bigger deal right now for her is the fact that her ship is the off meta. It is helping the Chimera counter not only the Executor, who has kind of been dominating for a while now, but it's also the only off meta that is challenging the Great Leviathan using the Empire team. Now granted, you do need a lot of other things to make that work, but if you don't have her built up nor the ship built up, you don't get to attempt those at all with the Empire fleet. So she kind of solidifies herself wanting to have higher relics, despite the fact that she isn't actually required for anything. I will say she can work at Relic 5, but for some people out there comparatively, that might be considered a higher relic. Next up is going to be 5s, and this one's going to seem super weird for anyone who's been using the 501st team for any amount of time, but 5s himself is not technically required for anything, and you can even leave him at gear 12 or a lower relic level for a long time, and I would advise not doing that. And the big reason why is, especially if you're wanting to use this team on offense, is the tactical awareness Zeta is going to specifically give his max health, max protection, speed, and offense stats to all the other clones when they trigger his death by they themselves dying. He takes their place, gives them all those stats, and this is crucial because he's not just giving it to one character, he's giving it to the 3 other clones. And you change his offense, his max health, and his max protection with every single relic level you give him. Granted, you can't add speed onto that, but I mean 3 out of 4 is pretty good. So making 5s another great candidate for this list of characters that you really don't want to ignore when it comes to a relic perspective, just because you don't need them there to unlock, say, Lord Vader, like you do for a lot of the other 501st clones. Although, it's a little bit of a shame 5s or Rex wasn't required given how strong their connection to Lord Vader or Anakin was. Next up is going to be our good friend Olda. Olda has a pivotal role in both PvP as well as the Night Sister Assault battle. She really does want to be at least Relic 5 to be able to take out those higher tiers and get you with a consistent stream of relic materials that can really help advance your account. If you ever at a lower relic level or a gear 12 or never farmed in the first place, it's going to be a lot harder to achieve because her surviving Sidious in that stupid wave 4 and bringing everyone back is essential to getting it to work. I will also say that there are a very small collection of people out there doing this, but it's worth mentioning that you can actually use an under your dock to better counter some things with Marin, because right now Marin's GAC Omicron is bugged and she only gets 100% turn meter on revives and deaths if every single other ally is dead, and the higher relic you take on Daka, the more difficult that becomes. But for the vast majority of things, including the assault battle, you want her at relic 5, relic 7, somewhere around there to get the job done. Next up, and this is going to be a little bit more fun, you're going to be able to pick and choose which one you want, but really need to upgrade at least one rebel tank. There are a lot of rebel teams that shift around here and there. Granted, CLS himself doesn't really care about having a tank because everything's dead by the time they move anyways, but for the most part, Rogue One, Mon Mothma, Saw, whatever kind of teams you're filtering through, they really can use one of these 3 tanks, and you can shift them around as your roster changes, and ultimately you might even need more than one of them once you develop more squads and even get all the way up to Leia herself. Right now I'm using K2SO for my Rogue One team with Adrad, and Baze is being built up specifically for Leia, but there's honestly pretty good arguments for all 3 of them shifting through all those squads. Again, looking at Saw, looking at Mon Mothma. Mon Mothma does have another option with Cara, but still, these are still pretty present. That really one of them should be worked on, and none of them are actually required for anything, which it's a little surprising that K2SO or Baze, actually none of them are required for profundity given the fact that they're all Rogue One. Next up is going to be armor. Armor is, as a lot of these are, going to be more roster specific, where you really have to have one of the 3 things that she wants to do, and that is SLKR, Sith Eternal Emperor, and Mandalorians, but there's even some other things you can do with Mandalorians. She just adds a lot to the team. She unlocks or solidifies a lot of counters for Sith Eternal and Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. One of the big parts of this is the fact that she is going to add in, let's see if I can click on the right ability here, she's going to add in the ability to not be critically hit and to counter. This is instrumental for C being able to take on JMK more in 3v3 than in 5v5, but you can do that too. And an SLKR versus Lord Vader, you don't need her, but gosh, it is fun to see SLKR hit Lord Vader back with a counter after he gets 3 stacks. And even if you don't get 3 stacks, the defense, the max health, the protection recovery, those are all really nice as well. Like I said, you can also use them in a Maul team if you aren't going for the full dark side thing, and if in addition to that you don't have Lord Vader. So very versatile lifter that can be used in several teams. Next up is going to be Enfys Nest. Enfys Nest had a time in the sun as a solo character, and maybe depending on where you're at, still does, but ultimately why I like having her geared up despite the fact that she's not required for anything is because she just adds a timeout risk to whatever team you put her on. I do personally like to have her on Dash, but I've seen her on completely random things like Night Sisters or Bad Batch or things like that, because the second you put her on the team, it becomes very challenging to use CLS and almost impossible to use Imperial Troopers, because I'm not going to get into her entire kit, but basically what happens is every single time you hit her, she gets bonus protection, and then it keeps stacking on itself, and if she never takes a turn, because you keep gaining way too much turn meter or removing the turn meter, she never takes a turn and you time out. It does help, it is very beneficial if she has almost no speed in order to do this. Again, this is for soloing or defensive viability. And then I also do like quite a bit of health stacked on top of it, because the bonus protection that she's gaining is based off of her max health. So definitely a way that you can bolster some of your defenses there, whether you're scouting or not. If you just know that this is a counter that everyone always uses Imperial Troopers on, throw Nest on it, ruin someone's day, have a great time. Next up is going to be Darth Nyus. This one also feels kind of silly. He's a great character. Everyone knows insta-kills are cool, but he also isn't required for anything, and different from Trey and Savage, isn't necessarily entirely limited by a GAC Omicron. It can be used in a few different game modes. He can be paired up with a few other Sith teams, and as a older marquee character, he does have that accessibility with not needing as many Kairos and can be a really great addition. And last, and I don't know what she is, but we're going to talk about Barriss Offria. What do we call her? versatily, I don't know if that's a word, versatily annoying. She can be put on a lot of teams, and she's a nuisance on pretty much every single one of them. She does kind of also have the magic tags of Galactic Republic and Jedi. The reason why we're calling these magic is because this essentially allows the character to be used in about 4 to 5 different teams just by having these 2 collective tags: Qui-Gon Jinn, JML, JMK, other Jedi, Knight Revan, Giant Luke teams. And then even beyond all that, one of the bigger boosts that she's also going to have is whenever an ally is critically hit, that ally recovers 20% health and Barris gains 10% turn meter. This is not limited to Jedi or Galactic Republic or Light Side or any of that, which makes her a very nice addition specifically on a Rey team. If you go into GAC Insight and you look up Rey, you look at all the things that beat her, you apply Barris, almost every single one of their win rates are going to drop, because she adding in 10% health recovery for the massive health pools that the Rey and her allies typically have is really annoying. If not as a timeout, it can actually even just stop the whole battle, because Rey can stack her damage throughout. And the longer the battle goes on, the better that is going to bode for Rey and Ben and really anyone else on the team. So that is going to make up the characters we want to talk about today, specifically honing in on what characters are required for nothing that might have really good value for your roster despite that. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, stay awesome.